a game rule. Let's pretend everybody is responsible, is independent, is separate. Sure, that's a great game, but it's a game. And so, the whole object of this Zen dialogue between the teacher and the student is to carry that game of being the separate ego to its logical conclusion, to its reductio ad absurdum. So that, as Blake said, the fool who persists in his folly will become wise.
Got it. There it is.
Hello, everyone. We are again back discussing soaring through chaos. I was almost going to say soaring through paradise because I'm in this amazing place called Cuernavaca, and it has a legacy called it's the city of eternal spring, 1 hour away from the capital of the country, Mexico, Ciudad de Mexico or Mexico City. And with us, with me, I'm Shankar Hemmady. I have Antonio, and we have Rodrigo, and 2 more friends are going to join us. They are from this area, from Cuernavaca and from the Mexico City area. Amazing people. They've been 4 young men who have been learning all about Eastern and Western philosophies, trying to make sense of their life, and also during these interesting Corona times. And on the other side, we have Anne Watts. Anne is the daughter of Alan Watts, and Anne has also been my mentor long time ago through the Human Awareness Institute. And Anne has been a mentor to probably thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of people. So would you introduce yourself, Anne?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about you and whatever you want to say.
Well, you've already said quite a bit about me. Yeah, so I'm Ann Watts. I'm Alan Watts's second daughter. And I was born in Evanston, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. And yeah, so not long ago, my sister and I put together a book called The Collected Letters of Alan Watts.
That's right. That's right.
Have you seen that book?
Yes, but I've not read it yet. I will read it now.
Yeah, well, it's over 600 pages because there were so many amazing letters. And they're all letters that he wrote so that we didn't have to get permissions from people for the letters that people wrote to him. We just published the letters he wrote. And there are letters from when he was a little boy, when he first went away to boarding school to his parents, and all the way till his death. And, but it was fascinating. And for me, because I've never been a student of Alan Watts myself, and I hadn't read his books, and so when I heard him lecture all the time. I grew up hearing him lecture. And, but when we were going through the letters, I was amazed at how brilliant he was at such a young age. It was just incredible. And I'd just stop and I'd think to myself, so how old was he when he wrote this? Right? And I'd figure it out. And I was like, I just couldn't believe it. And so there are letters to his parents, and there are letters to many well-known people that people know, Timothy Leary and lots of other people, Gary Snyder.
Oh, they were all in touch? Timothy Leary, Richard Alpert.
Yeah, they're all letters. They were all good friends of Alan's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah. And Carl Jung was another one. He wrote a letter to Carl Jung when he was like 25. And it's like peer to peer. Like there was no, like this older famous man, and Alan was like, just, I have some information for you that you might like to have, right? Boom. I'm like, yeah, so just, that's how he was. He was just like peer to peer always.
Wow.
Anyway, so that was a fascinating adventure for me. I feel like I really learned so much about him. going through that. And there's, you know, you learn about my life as well. And my sister and, you know, our siblings, what life was like. And it was definitely not the kind of, I always say the Leave It to Beaver, which is an ancient show, but you know,
Leave It to Beaver.
It wasn't the usual kind of upbringing that so many people had in this country. And it was bumpy. It was a bumpy road for me. Yeah, so, and then I lived in England for 5 years. I went to a girls' boarding school there, which was excellent for me. And then I came back to the US, and I came back to California, which I always felt was my home. And so I was happy to be there. And I got married. I had 2 children who are now grown up and have children of their own. And then I discovered the Human Awareness Institute through a man I was dating who just kept telling me about it and how amazing it was. So I went. That was in 1983. And it totally changed my life. And I was so impressed by the value of the work that I wanted it to go on longer than our founder Stan Dale's life would be. Yeah. And I wanted it to be able to be more places than he could be at once. And so I said I wanted to learn to do what he did, to be a leader of the workshops. Well, I'm basically an introvert, and it was the most terrifying thing I could ever imagine. And it's where I learned that you feel your fear and you do it anyway, right? You just bring it with you. And so I learned to lead the workshops. And by 1985, I started leading workshops for the Human Awareness Institute.
We almost have a mini workshop here. There are 5 of us with you.
Hi, hello.
This is Pablo.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, Pablo. Thank you for your message.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Is Diego also joining us?
Yeah, our friend Diego is also coming anytime now.
Okay, good.
So Anne is introducing herself. If I were to briefly summarize what she said, Anne is the second daughter of Alan Watts. Okay. And she said she wasn't his student, as in she didn't study his work as in books, but of course she heard his speeches and a lot of the talks he gave. He was a prolific speaker and a prolific writer, more than 25 published books. And I guess you've read his work, and Antonio has read his work, right? Yes. So we're going to discuss that. And Anne herself is an amazing person. She has been one of my mentors. And that was more than 10 years ago. We met probably 15 years, around 2007, I remember. And for more than 2 years, I was at what's called the Human Awareness Institute. And the sweetest of people. And Anne was one of my senior teachers. And I have to say, I didn't stay in touch for the last several years, but here we are. Thanks to you all, we get to reconnect, and it all happened in less than a day.
It's amazing.
Yes. So tell us more about your work also, and what you've been doing lately.
Right. Well, the work of the Human Awareness Institute is really about teaching people to be more loving with themselves and with each other, and to be kinder and more compassionate and more understanding. So it's really about helping people be the love that they were born. And so communication tools and healing touch, and also healing shame. And especially a lot of people are taught to have shame around their bodies and their sexuality. And one of our big things is to heal that shame and have people accept this God-given thing that we are, you know, that if we're made by God, how can we be shameful and trash? I don't believe any of that. So I just think that sex is something that's sacred and special, and how lucky we are that we have it. So rather than be ashamed about it, to celebrate it and to enjoy about it, and to be respectful, right? And so one of the things we teach a lot about nowadays is about boundaries and about people being able to say yes and no, and honoring each other's yeses and nos. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. They don't know how to say no when they mean no, because they think they need to please other people.
Yeah.
And so all of that, there's so many levels of respectful communication that we have. And thanks for joining us.
So this is the whole crew.
This is the whole crew.
Let me
Here we
quickly
are.
mention their names, and maybe also each one can introduce, and also tell us about how you got exposed to Alan Watts, or in general about your life journey. So
Yeah, that'd be great.
I mentioned Rodrigo joined us first. So I'm going to go in the order in which. So Rodrigo, you want to say 2 minutes about yourself?
Well, yeah, it's actually interesting because I've always been interested to meditation and things like that, but I'm always distracted with my surroundings and school and sports and other things. But now in quarantine, thanks to coronavirus, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but thanks to that, I've been introduced to it and I've been meditating, and my mind is a little bit more clear. I am a little bit new into this, but it's really interesting. And now that you can have people that understand it around you, it's pretty amazing. And I just love to be able to connect deeper with my surroundings, and I just love that. I've always been a kid who was just interested in other things, but now I'm really connecting to myself and who am I, and who I'm the same person than my brothers here, my friends.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my story.
And how old were you when you first became interested in meditation?
Like 18. Now I'm 20.
Now you're 20. Yeah. I'm so happy for you. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we have his older brother, Antonio. Antonio,
Yes.
tell us about you.
I'm Antonio. Right now I'm studying industrial engineering, but for like maybe 3 or 4 years I've been interested into Western culture, no? Western knowledge or wisdom. So I've been very interested in Alan Watts. Like, actually, he was like the first teacher or mentor that I found on the internet that really knew how to explain all of this that is really unexplainable, basically. And the way he put it in a poetry, in beautiful words, made it stick into my brain, and never like I cannot ever stop thinking about it, you know. And right now I'm trying to organize my brain in the way that Alan Watts or Carl Jung or these geniuses did, and all the knowledge and wisdom they have for us in their books. I'm trying to just absorb it, you know, really consume it every day. So I'm like, so someday I can be part of the growth in consciousness that they were part of, no? Because with their knowledge, we can always continue growing. We can always help this growth in consciousness. Like, I don't know where it can go, but I'm sure we can help.
Yeah.
And imagine my surprise. I come all the way to Mexico to learn about shamanism and about Mayan and Aztec cultures, which of course I get a glimpse of. And all these people are talking about Satchidananda and about Buddhism, and they of course they know all about their culture for sure. But they know much more than that. And I was like fascinated, totally fascinated. So then we have Pablo. Pablo, tell us about you.
Yes.
You've lived in many countries.
Yes. So I lived in the U.S. For 7 years of my life. And when I was starting university in Chicago, that's when I first became more sensitive to life And I was already sensitive when I was little, but then kind of you lose it.
Mhm.
And at 18, I was exposed to some of your father's lectures. And it's beautiful because, for example, Alan Watts united me in a way with this guy, with
Diego.
Diego. We met at university, and I gave him a book from him on Buddhism, and that's a way that we connected.
Right.
And yeah, just listening to his talks, he just speaks to me like I really enjoy the way he articulates and the way that he brings heaven down to earth through his words, and it's beautiful, and it's a joy that I get to speak with you, with you, part of his family,
Right.
and I have a question. I will let Diego speak, but then I have a question that I would.
Great. I love it. All right.
And-
Thank
and-
you. That's lovely.
And since you both came late, I just want to mention that Anne and her sister, right? What's your sister's name? The one who published the book with you?
Joan.
Joan. So
Joan.
Anne and Joan have published a book called The Collected Letters of Alan Watts, which is 600 pages. Starting from the time when he was still a student in boarding school, all the way he wrote letters to Carl Jung, and as if Carl was a friend. Say, I have some information for you. He writes to Carl Jung. Carl was already a celebrity. But that's the beauty of it. That when it comes to learning, I mean, I'm learning so much from these people. I don't consider myself a senior citizen when I'm with them. Because if you look at how old we are, we may be thousands of years old for all.
Right.
But
Right.
we have this, we are stuck with the biological age many times. So with that, I'm going to introduce, Diego is going to introduce himself. Diego,
Hi, Diego.
tell us about you a little bit.
I don't know. My name is Diego. I am a human being. I don't know what to say. I'm really overwhelmed with this situation because it feels like dreamlike. And I've started to notice the dreamlikeness of life and how everything, synchronicity, and how everything comes together. And the fact that, how Pablo was saying, that we were sharing the knowledge that we gathered from Alan's lectures. And now that we've come full circle right now, because we're connecting directly with someone. This is part of the huge family, and I consider myself part of sort of way, and all of you part of that family, because we've all kind of made our lives better because of the things that he made or the things that he learned that he then taught. So it makes me so happy, really, because I think about when times that I'm feeling sad or concerned about my future, and times like these where I can really see the coincidences and I can see the play that is life. So I don't have to worry, I just have to live, and I have to give love. And that's something that he taught all of us, that we have to live in a way that we are understanding of our circumstances. And I mean, it's so much knowledge that I can't really put it into words, but I am just so grateful and so happy to you, Shankar, and to you, Anne, for giving us the time and the patience. So.
And I'm grateful to all these young men. Because of them, I reconnected with them. Otherwise, I kept postponing it. Every time I was like, someday I should call Anne. Oh, but I'm busy. You know how it is.
I know.
And I'm not busy anymore. Now, interestingly, and again, I'm going to summarize what Anne has been doing since Diego came late. Anne has been working with what's known as the Human Awareness Institute, and she can summarize what she does. Since 1983, she's been exposed in 85 onwards. I was one of her students. I did a workshop with Anne around 2006, 2007 timeframe. And you talked about love. And this, one of the things I like about Human Awareness Institute, it doesn't talk love in abstract terms. It talks about all manifestations of love, including love as, the kindness and the compassion, but also the physical manifestation in the form of intimacy and even sexuality. So tell us a little more about your work again. You have so much to say. Just tell us anything.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, well, I was saying it's about giving people tools for communication, and how to be intimate is really how to be talking about the truth of what your thoughts and feelings are, like really letting them out and being a good listener, being able to really hear someone and know that you don't have to fix them or try to change them. And we actually teach people to listen from a place of just letting the words land. And you don't even need to respond to them. You just need to hold the space for the person to speak into. And then you do the same, and they listen to you in the same kind of way, just open-hearted listening. And people really connect in a very deep way like that. And then we teach people the importance of a very loving, gentle, kind, nurturing touch, which has nothing to do with sex, but has to do with nurturing. And all human beings need touch. And it's my experience that often humans go to having sexual intercourse long before they're ready, but because it's the only way they know how to be touched. It's the only way they know. And so we teach people how to touch, how to give and receive nurturing touch that is so healing. And so it helps people to embody the philosophies. And again, it helps with the acceptance of themselves and each other. And one of the things I was saying earlier is that part of what we're about is helping people to heal shame, heal the shame about their bodies and their sexuality, and celebrating who they are as human beings rather than thinking everything is so bad. And so, I often see quotes of my dad's, and I often think, wow, we're exactly on the same page.
Yes.
And how did we get there? Is it because I heard him so much as a child? I don't know, so much of his philosophy is familiar to me in that way. Another thing that I do is I do healing inner child work. And because I believe that we all have a healthy, there's a child that lives inside us who made lots of decisions about how life is when they were little, and based on very limited information, and then they live their lives out of that. And so then they wonder why these patterns keep happening over and over and over again. And so I developed, there's a workshop I do at Esalen Institute called Reclaiming Your Authentic Self. And it's really about telling your story, being heard, and then giving yourself alternate thoughts about how life could be. You give that little child, you do visualization work that gives that child a very different experience. And then the child that lives inside has something to choose from, not just the original story, which is only our perception of something that's only, somewhat true. I have to say, when I was doing the collected letters, there were some places where my father was writing about me and what was going on in my childhood. I sometimes wonder when I'm leading these workshops, are my memories true? And reading his letters validated my memories, which was it was very interesting for me. And then of course I have my sister who also validates it. But so I really, I had a very unhappy childhood in terms of with my mother and my stepmother, being an unwanted child, that kind of thing. And so I had a lot to heal for myself. And so I did this work for myself, and I thought, wow, this is really possible. And so that's why created the workshop to help others have the same thing. And I think one of you was talking about the same thing about, you know, I think it was you,
Shankar.
no, not Shankar, next to you, Shankar, the first. What's
Antonio,
no you
Rodrigo.
in the gray shirt, in the gray shirt.
Antonio.
Antonio. Yes, sorry. But I think it was you who was talking about, you know, like learning everything and getting it all in there so that you can share it, so that you can give it out, so you can be of help to others, right? And I think that when we have life experiences that are really moving and really like improve our lives, that's the thing we can do, is to share that with others. And I think that's what you're all about, you know, like taking it in, making it your own, you know, and then you have something to give others, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that, Anne, because many times we have this tendency to believe that if somebody in the family is enlightened or knows everything, then the rest, you know, there's a belief even in Hindu philosophy that once you've figured out life, you've reached nirvana, then your entire past and present will be healed. And then it's like the Disney story of happily ever after.
Right.
And
Right.
what you're telling us is that you, like any other child, had the challenges that any other child would have.
Right.
Just because Alan understood and interpreted some of the amazing wisdom traditions of the world, Buddhism, Tao, Hindu, as well as integrating it with Christianity, did not exempt you or anybody in your family from having a regular, normal life with the shame, with the guilt, the joys, the sorrows, everything. And I
Right.
mean, that really is a big deal for everybody to hear, because we have this notion. And I've thought about it. If only I was born in a family that had the right parents. And that's so, so fake.
Right.
We are
Right.
always born in the right family,
Right.
wherever we are. And
Yeah.
if I was the son of Eleanor, if I was the son of whatever, Carl
Right.
Jung. No,
Right.
Carl Jung went through depression. Carl Jung was, I think, at one time suicidal. And that's what led him to go deeper, introspect much more deeply, and then figure out where and, come up with the whole idea of architects. So thank you for sharing that. That is so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just so that after I studied with you, I went and studied the neuroscience of a lot of these things. I went and studied the neuroscience of shame with Dr. Brené Brown's work and the
Okay.
psychology of shame and vulnerability. Also studied the neuroscience of touch with Dr. Keltner at UC Berkeley. Amazing work. And I studied the neuroscience of compassion at the Stanford Center for Compassion. And then I said, oh, I've been studying too long. When am I going to apply it? So that's how.
Right.
This is one of
Yeah.
the applications, getting people together to
Right.
discuss and actually do this work in different ways. So I'm so
Right.
grateful that you are opening the truth about what you are and being vulnerable enough to share exactly what you went through. And
Yeah.
Pablo, you said you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question, and maybe in kind of unison of what we were talking about, of idealizing that once you know yourself, or that you reach a point where you get it, that all your problems are gone, which is not the case, and all your conditioning as a human.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, and maybe you can answer for yourself, but I'm also curious because my introduction was Alan Watts to all this. How I wanted to know, how was he in his daily life, in his humanness, his humanity? Because as we listen to those talks, sometimes we can idealize, oh, like this guy is over here,
Right.
But
Right.
but I'm curious, how did he handle his humanness? How was he?
Well,
Excellent question.
I think in some ways it was challenging for him. So he was an alcoholic,
Oh.
And all of this is in our book. He was an alcoholic, and he was addicted to women. So, you know, he was not a faithful husband. He was a womanizer. And all of that, you know, a lot of that was when he grew up, he thought he was ugly. And my mother was the first woman that he ever really had a successful relationship with to start. And so I think there's a part of him that felt he needed to make up for lost time. So when he found out that he was attractive and the women were attracted to him, it was like, you know, bees to honey. You know, it was just like, wow, this whole world opened up for him. Yeah. And so, you know, those were his two main Achilles heels. He was a brilliant man, absolutely brilliant, and he was brilliant at what he did. Absolutely brilliant. And I always say to people, the fact that he was not perfect, take the gifts that he has for you and leave the rest. Yeah, right?
Absolutely.
And so he was playful. He loved to dance. He loved to sing. He loved to tell stories. He was an artist. He was an amazing artist. And I remember as a child, he used to, everybody's eggs had to be cooked at a different number of minutes. And so he would do these drawings of these humorous characters on the eggs. And so each one, he knew which was my egg, which was my sister's egg, which was, you know, and then he would pull them out, these boiled eggs. and it was a shame to crack into them, right? Because they were such beautiful works of art. But that's how he was. He loved nature. He absolutely loved nature. And he always knew how to live well on little. I mean, he was never wealthy. And he was like the struggling artist. But and he was so kind to people.
Wow.
He was always so kind and so thoughtful. He was highly intuitive. One of our friends told me that she was once alone with him. They were talking in a room, and he leaned forward and he put his hand on her knee. And he said, "I don't want you to be frightened. We're about to have an earthquake." And sure enough, within a moment, there was an earthquake.
Wow.
And so you know, it's like there's so much
Wow.
about who he was and all of that. It's amazing. And I have this phrase that I often say: we're all perfectly imperfect. Right? Right? Yes. We're perfectly imperfect. I mean, I look at a tree and I see the gnarls and all the things about it that one would say, if you saw that on a human, you would say, oh, how ugly, right? But we look at trees and we say how beautiful they are. Well, we're the same. You know, we're all perfectly imperfect. It's just the way it is.
It's right? Sort of, it's so funny sharing this with you because you've probably heard it 1,000 times before. And I'm also curious what you think about, just like to satisfy my own curiosity, as to what do you think about when you see all of us at our age. I mean, I'm 22 and he's 23, 2023. Sort of.
And I'm more than double that.
And you're more than double that. But also,
I'm more than triple that.
But it feels as if age was boundaryless or boundless. Right. We were not bound by numbers.
Yes.
But I'm curious because about that, and also that's what you're saying. It's like I will always remember what he said about clouds, that we are like clouds, and human beings are like clouds. So when you see a cloud, you don't see perfection, and it's what you're saying, that we're perfectly imperfect. And he talks about Ri and this what's the other the Japanese that he used to see in Japanese paintings, the texture, and he sees the order, and then you go about to see in the geometry, and the imperfection, then comes out the natureness of the things. So I mean, again, it feels overwhelming, but again, it also made me aware of my own humanity and my own imperfections, and that what you are saying is, I think, very latent, and with us young men and young persons, especially in our country. I mean, we feel very at unease with our looking and with our attitudes. So I believe that a part of my being and my confidence that I now can speak of comes from this knowledge that what amazes me the most is that he connected the Oriental world with the Occidental world.
Right.
So I always see him as a bridge to me. So I'm so grateful for that, and I take on, and I'm sure you do as well, and we take on that job which does not belong to him, because he's only a medium. What he said about discipline, that you have to have the discipline to bring down something, and I see ourselves, and that we can be able to share into what you're saying, make it our own, and help others, because it was what he was doing, that he was helping others. And I just see the bigger picture in that we are all here to help each other, and he does it in a form, and he has become very popular in YouTube with the whole lecture things and all that. So it's very curious, like how trending things work, and how this is, I feel, arising in youth, in young people. We are starting to realize that we are not driven by capitalism or by women and chasing things, but we are more driven by our feelings and by our connection with nature and art. And it amazes me that, because we can understand ourselves as mediums, right? So it's that we are clouds and we're mediums of nature, and it's what we are all saying, that we are all able to share into that knowledge. I don't know. I'm so excited. I can't really speak clearly, but thank you.
Well, I like that image of the clouds, because one of the things about clouds is that they are not separate. You know, like they're separate for this moment, and then they kind of join, and then there's, you know, like it's we're all together, and we're all made of the same stuff, and we're all, you know, like all of that, and then we have these moments. My father once described reincarnation to me as, you know, that we're all like drops in the ocean. And so, you know, here I am, this is my life and my lifespan, and then I'm back in the ocean, and then this happens, and then there's this next, you know, and I loved that. I just thought that was such a beautiful analogy of life, and just always felt so good. I mean, I feel so blessed that my father really fostered the love of music and art and nature in me, you know, like all of those things, and the joy of it, you know, he was really connected to the joy of all of that.
Yeah, I also wanted to, based on what you said, I think you mentioned that he was always in this struggling artist lifestyle, and us as young people, we're always talking like, oh, what are we gonna do with our life, and how can we be a positive impact in the world? What kind of job do we want to have? So I'm just curious to know, how did he deal with security and doing what he loved, and did you feel that you sometimes worried about how he was gonna make a living, or really just trusted the universe or the process? How was he with that?
Well, he absolutely did what he loved and what he was really good at. And he was able to get grants from various foundations to help him do that and sustain him through that. He had a lot of children. He had 5 more children after my sister and myself.
Oh.
And he had to support them all. And so he worked hard. He worked really hard. And he traveled a lot, and he gave lectures all over the world, and mostly all over this country, but all over the world. He had radio and television programs. He was writing books. I mean, he was constantly working a lot.
Discipline.
And then, you know, he would get invited to parties, and then he would party hard. And he was always the life of any party, you know. Yeah, so he worked hard, and but you know, my experience was always that he was able to live simply and elegantly in that simplicity, you know. That's how it felt. You know, like we would go to the beach and he'd bring wine and bread and cheese, you know, like that was a feast. And we'd have a wonderful time. We'd build a bonfire, and, you know, it would be wonderful. And so it's that kind of thing, that kind of living. It's so complex because a lot of the people who were fans of Alan's were people with a lot of money. And so they would invite him to their homes and ask him to, you know, give lectures in their homes. And he would stay in these palatial homes, you know, and
It's like Shankar.
eat these amazing foods and, you know, like all of that. And
This is so funny you mention, and they are noticing that I'm in this palatial home now. It's a Spanish villa, 5,000 square feet, and people give me a place to stay wherever I go. And
Right.
so far, I've been to 20 states in India and
Yeah.
South Korea, of course, the
Wow.
Bay Area, all over the US. And now this is my first trip to Mexico. I went to the Chihuahuan Desert, and now I'm in Cuernavaca, waiting. Just the last 2 months, I've been in a retreat because in theory, it's a quarantine time, but we feel like we're in paradise. So,
Yeah.
so again,
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm no Alan Watts, but it is possible to live a life like that now. I'm doing that sort of in my retirement. My kids are grown up, but it is possible to live a life, a bohemian life, if you will, and
Right.
do the things that we really love, where
Right.
we are clear about how we are contributing to people. So I met them. I was totally quiet for almost a month. I didn't talk to anyone. And then it was Rodrigo's and Antonio's mother said, "What are you doing? We see you, but you haven't talked to any one of us." I said, "I'm sorry, poquito español." So I don't know much Spanish. So, and then they said, "We will teach you Spanish. We can speak English." And that's how I got to know them. And the last 2 days I've had lunch and dinner with them. And tomorrow I'm going to make Indian food for all of them.
All right. That's
I
wonderful.
learned cooking here. Actually, I'd never cooked good food in my life. I learned Indian and a little bit of Mexican and a little bit of Thai. But I've become a decent cook. So next time I visit you, I promise to
That's
cook for you.
great.
So,
That sounds
So,
wonderful.
we have a question from Rodrigo.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
So, for example, sometimes I struggle with, now that I'm being really introduced into this, sometimes I struggle with, if I'm going to meditate, I have heard people told me that you're going to feel like this, or you must feel like this. This is what meditation is. So sometimes I'm trying to feel that instead of like breaking that and feeling it by myself. And I'm trying like to break walls of like what people tell me. And I would really like, well, you grew up with someone that understood everything. So I would really like to understand if you were struggling with this, when someone was telling you how the world works from a very understanding point of view, and how you manage to get your own point of view and like feel it by yourself. Because sometimes I just feel really happy and I just connect so hard. Like I can feel my surroundings, and it's just beautiful. But once I start being like, oh, but he told me it's like this, and then I'm trying to
follow what meditation is. But now, but then I break it and then I can continue. So how was it for you?
Well, I'm not a meditator.
Oh,
Let me just say that up front. However, my father was, not all the time, but he certainly did meditate. And but when you say that to me, what comes to me is to, you know, when you have that moment of feeling that joy, just be with it. And the minute you let your mind go to what you should be doing, you lose it. That's just what you just said, you know? And that's how we are. That's how our mind does. Our mind tricks us out of experiences often because, oh, it should be this or it should be that. How about it just is, right? It just is what it is. So in that moment when you choose to be quiet with yourself, just being in the isness of what is, and so thoughts come up, you let them go, right? Or you don't let them go, or you know, like whatever. It's, I think the thing is when we're trying to fit into a mold, that's when it's when we really sort of go astray because we're trying to fit into something. Now I have to say, a Zen master might tell you something quite different. My grandmother, my mother's mother, Ruth Fuller Sasaki, was the first woman and the first foreigner accepted into the Zen priesthood in Japan.
Wow.
She was not a nun, she was a priest. And that was what they always said a woman could never do. And my grandmother was a very ambitious Scorpio lady, brilliant scholar. And she decided to become a Zen priest, and she did. And she was very disciplined. And so she and my father, who were great friends, would often have disagreements about, she just thought he was a flibbertigibbet, you know, like, but the interesting thing is almost no one has ever read her books and everyone has read Alan's books, right? And I think there's a proof in the pudding. And I admire what she did. And she also, translated a lot of the Zen koans and Zen writings and teachings into English for English-speaking students. And Gary Snyder worked with her on that. So he was a close friend of my grandmother as well as my father. And there is a book called, let's see, it's right out in the other room. Can't think of the name of it right now. I'll get it for you. But it's a book about my grandmother and how she met Sokian Sasaki, who was sent by his teacher to bring Zen to America. And he ended up in New York City. And my grandmother met him there and studied under him. And then she kind of became his benefactor. And she started the first Zen Institute in America, in New York City. And eventually, during the war, he was sent away to a Japanese internment camp. And when he came out, he really wanted to marry my grandmother. And so they found a way to be married. It's very complicated. And then shortly after that, he died. And so she continued to run the institute, but then she went to Japan to study and actually become a Roshi in her own right. And so for her, the discipline, and there's a way in which the Zen teacher knows if you got it or you didn't get it. And my dad never got it in the way that a Zen master wants you to get it. And so but you know, that he wasn't interested in that. He was more interested in being than being in the strict form of it. And so I think they're both right. So I hope that kind of, I'm giving you both sides of it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Did you even have a question? You have a question?
Thank you.
Antonio.
I think often about like the term immortality somehow, and I'm thinking right now how malleable is a young kid's brain, no? So you grew up with Alan Watts' wisdom, and somehow he was there to build your brain as you were. Like they say that the first 7 years of life are the ones that determine your personality somehow, no?
Right.
My question is, what techniques, or do you remember what kind of stories would he tell you to share his wisdom, to bring his brain into your own young brain and stay there? Because to me, it's mind-blowing the fact that you have Alan Watts inside of you. I mean, we all do because of his wisdom, but you grew up purely in his wisdom, and also with your personal, like with the things you told us you had to deal with. But you had these Alan Watts techniques since you were a little child to deal with all this, you know, somehow. And my question is that what kind of wisdom or what kind of stories would he tell you?
Wow. You know, I don't actually remember so much stories that he told me. I remember, like, he loved to draw. You know, he would help us draw, my sister and myself. Yeah, but I don't remember the stories so much. I do remember that what little time I actually had with him was really precious to me, really, really precious. And then he would sing. You know, he loved to sing, and yeah, things like that. Like, we would go somewhere in the car, and he would always be singing and smoking a cigar. Yeah, I wish I could remember stories, but I don't really. But, you know, I think so much of what I did get, I mean, I got a mixture of things, because I got things from my father, I got things from my mother, and I got things from, you know, my schooling and whatever else was around. But as I said earlier, I was present a lot when he was giving lectures. I was just there. I wasn't paying attention. It was, you know, but, you know, it gets in there whether you're paying attention or not. And which I think attributes a lot to a lot of things for me. I think partly my life circumstances, and partly from him, I got the skills of being a really good listener and being compassionate.
Yeah, that was the aim of my question, like knowing what kind of tools did he give you to deal with life somehow. No?
Right. Yeah. And interesting, the thing that's really different about me, I think it's because of the introvert nature. I'm not really a self-starter, right? Like extroverts, like my father, like my teacher Stan Dale, and other people I know, will just start talking and creating conversation and all this interesting stuff out of nowhere. Whereas I'm a responder. You know, that's what gets me going, is being in response to, and so I see that as something that's different. And I have an aversion to writing, which is really a challenge. You know, like, I have so much I could write, and I have such a resistance to writing. And so I remember when I was your age, I had this thought that it's all been said, and better than I could say it. That was my thought, you know, and it's kind of, it stuck with me. And part of that was that my father could talk me on any subject at any time. And, you know, there was a period of time in my life when I used to sneak to go to church because he would try to talk me out of going to church because he was so bitter about the church and the hypocrisy of it. And I certainly have a fair dosage of that myself. But there was a period of time in my life where I found it very comforting to go to church. And so I would just go and I wouldn't tell anybody where I was going, you know, so.
Well, Anne, I mean, I have known you as an amazing, remarkable teacher. And I'm an extrovert, but I don't write much. I write only a little because of the same thing. I feel so much has already been written. But what I value about you, and you said earlier you're not a meditator, is your presence. When you are in the room, and I've probably met you on 8 or 10 different days, you know, not just one workshop, but other mini workshops. When you're in the room, you're completely present to whoever you're talking to. You're such an amazing listener. You're just so present that your presence is healing. And it's like a silent Zen teacher. You know, you're just there. And to me, that has been an ongoing lesson because me being an extrovert, I have a difficult time keeping my mouth shut. And they know that, see? Got them to know. But it's interesting because I spent hours being alone, especially the last 2 months that I've been here in Cuernavaca. I've spent hours being alone. Sometimes no internet, just alone. Not even meditating, but just cooking. My latest hobby is cooking. But just being alone, and that has helped. And I learned many of these things from many teachers, especially you. I remember Stan was a talker, but his wife, Helen was such an amazing, compassionate listener.
Yes, yes.
To me, because I'm a natural born talker, the listeners are the ones who heal, who are really a boon to me. So thank you, and tell us more about your work. You mentioned what you do a little bit, but what kind of work do you really do? If it's not, I consider it meditation, but you said it's not. So what kind of work do you do? Tell us a little more detail about
So
it.
when you say what is the work that I do, what specific are you wanting to?
What kind of workshops are you holding lately? I know we're in current quarantine times, so you cannot have them face to face anymore. But are you continuing your work during during the Corona COVID-19 times?
Well, with the Human Awareness Institute, we've created an online workshop. And then for our team members, I did an online training for being on team, what it is to be the role of being on team, and also the tool that we use most commonly is called active listening, where you hear someone and then you reflect back to them what you're hearing, and the facts and the feelings, basically. And so that's that piece. And then I did a team, what we call a team workshop, also online. And what's really extraordinary is to find that with the use of breakout rooms, giving people something to talk about and to share in a heartful feeling way with each other, sometimes one-on-one and sometimes in small groups, people feel amazingly connected. And even without touch, they feel nourished and uplifted and like they get something of value. So that's an amazing thing to discover, that we can be on Zoom together and have such an amazing experience. It's awesome.
And is it the same website, hai.org?
Yes.
Hi.org for people
Yes,
to
hi.org.
register?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great, great. I haven't been
Yeah.
there in a while.
Yeah. Well, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot. It's really, it's amazing. And yeah, so what else would I say about that? Yeah, it's that. So the online workshop, it's called Loving Me, Loving You. And it's really about, you know, how to be more loving with oneself, and then how to come from that place to be more loving and available with others. And so that's what that workshop is about. It's really great.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I started this series of interviews is because no one knows everything, and especially we are in such uncertain times. Talk
Right.
about impermanence, talk about
Right.
uncertainty.
Right.
There hasn't been a period in anybody's life that I can think of where this is like a direct Zen experience of impermanence.
Right.
And so, you know what I mean? We don't have to look for impermanence. We don't have to meditate. Every moment is impermanent. We don't know. I don't
Right.
know when I'll be going back to India or to California. I've been here for 2 months. And then sometimes I meet, sometimes I don't. And that's where the beauty is, that it is possible to have a meaningful way of living during these uncertain times.
Right.
Do you have any
Right.
suggestions? And after that, Pablo has a question. Do you have any suggestions on how we can use this time that we are going through this crisis called COVID-19 or coronavirus situation, the pandemic? How can we make the most of this time? What can we do to be ready for our life? We cannot keep postponing our life. So
Right.
what should we do?
Right. Well, you know, for me, I was so busy. And when some of that fell away, I was finally able to get some rest, and I needed a lot of that, just to rest and to let go. And then I started doing things, cleaning up, like cleaning up the messes in my life. And so I've been doing a lot of that, cleaning closets, cleaning files, cleaning, you know, I call it cleanse and purge. and I know a lot of people do that with their bodies. I mean, I think it's an important time to be taking care of our bodies. And I hope that we will really take a lot of the value we get from this experience forward into our lives. Because I think there is a lot of value. I think the more we practice loving ourselves and loving each other, being loving, being kind, being compassionate and caring, right? And really choosing that, focusing on that. I always say love is a choice. We choose love. And so the more we live in that place in ourselves, I find I'm enormously comfortable. I don't find this challenging or difficult at all. And it's amazing. I feel very at peace with what's happening for myself. I'm not at peace with what's happening in the outer world. I'm not at peace that so many people are dying. I'm not at peace when a black man gets murdered in broad daylight in front of everyone. I'm not at peace about any of those things. And I get it is what is, and I'm angry about it. I don't like it. At the same time, I can enjoy what's here and present with me, and so it's like that whole thing of all of those things mixed together. Yeah, and that's one of those things, like, you know, that whole thing about enlightenment. Well, you shouldn't, you know, if you're enlightened, you won't feel angry, or if you're enlightened, you know, well, then maybe you're not human anymore, because I think that's part of being human. Human is having all the feelings that we have and not labeling them right or wrong, right? For me, our feelings are messengers, and what is the message that my feelings are giving me? That's what's important. And yeah, so I don't know if that's useful at all, but
yeah, no, that's exactly. I always tell people there's no formula to being happy. there's no formula to being successful in life. So we want to hear from each person's experience. So
Right.
thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Pablo,
Yes.
you have a question?
Yes, and I have another question. It's like I look at Alan Watts and I think, man, you're an OG. You're a gangster. I really respect what you do. And I was wondering what he back in his time, who did he look to? Like, oh, I respect what you do, and I recognize you, or I admire
Role
I
models.
admire what you do. So, do you know if he had certain people that he would maybe keep a tab on and checking their what they were up to and things like this?
Well, I think there were a lot of people that he did. I think, you know, he worked with Timothy Leary and Ram Dass, and so there's letters in the book about that experience, and of course Carl Jung was someone, and you know, there were many others, and I think he had a lot of respect for my grandmother and what she did and who she was, yeah. So I think, like, Buckminster Fuller was somebody who he admired and who he had to the house, and you know, there were people like that Margaret Mead in her work. He was such a voracious student. He read everything, and he was very up to date. And there are even some political letters that he wrote, you know, like letters defending Native Americans, and you know, letters about not making LSD illegal, because he felt like it's better in the hands of doctors, and use it wisely, and not, you know, that you make it illegal and then you're going to make it underground and popular, you know, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So there's some letters about those kinds of things in there as well. Yeah. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, totally. And for me, just one last question that I wanted to ask you is, how did he deal with death when he was? I don't even know how he died, but if he knew that death was near, how was he with that?
Well, he knew that he was run down, and he was calling my sister, who knows a lot about nutrition, and trying to get help because he was so run down. But he just died in his sleep. Yeah, he just died in his sleep. And there are many stories about that too. but yeah, that's just the short and sweet of it. He died in his sleep, which I think is a wonderful way to go. The only one I know better than that is a friend of ours. Got all dressed up. She lived in Santa Barbara, and she had a housemaid, and she got all dressed up to go out to a party. And she said to her friend, you know, I think I'm just going to go lie down for a few minutes before I go. And she went in, she lay down, and she died. All dressed up for a party. I thought, yeah, that's the way to go.
Good one, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, that's a really wonderful way to go. But yeah, and I mean, I don't think he had any fear of death at all. No, not at all. And I think he was tired. He worked so hard to take care of people, and, you know, juggling all his responsibilities. He was just tired. And, you know, I think it was enough.
How old was he when he died?
58.
Oh, okay.
Young.
Oh, very young.
Yeah, very young. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's always a joy to hear these kinds of stories, and I'm so grateful you made the time. And this was not by any means a planned thing. When I saw that all these young men were so interested in Alan Watts, I'm like, and I know Anne, and Anne is one of my mentors. I'm like, really? You really? They wanted to give me a hug during Corona times. Okay, let me trace her and see if we can get her. The only contact I had with you, the current one, was the Facebook page, the Facebook connection. So I'm really grateful you made
so amazing. Yeah, and I'm so happy to meet you all, and you know, get to talk with you and all of that. It's just wonderful.
Here's something we're gonna do.
And your English is awesome.
Yes.
Thank you. It's
Thank
just
you.
beautiful.
Gracias.
Yeah.
Gracias.
So one
Yeah,
thing we're gonna do
gracias.
is we're gonna find that book that you and your Joan wrote
Yeah,
about the collected letters of Anwar's.
right.
And
Yeah.
we'll probably study that and we make that our next exercise.
Sure.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
And then
Well,
if there is time, if you have time, we may again call you again, but to
okay.
share what we felt about the book.
Yeah.
Because I have at least 2 weeks here. That I know for sure. Because
Great.
I know I cannot leave. But 2 weeks is enough time for us to. Is there an online version of the book?
That book is only in English. It's such a big book. They don't think it's
Is
going to
it,
get translated.
Yeah, can I get it to Amazon Kindle or something online?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Then
Yeah,
I will definitely
absolutely.
get it and I'll start
Okay.
reading it. And we will all kind of learn from it.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm so grateful we had this chance to talk to you. Do you have any other words of wisdom, anything you want to share about touch? Because I know how important physical touch is.
Mm,
And you mentioned that as a big part of the Human Awareness Institute and the work you
Right.
do. And I know
Right.
that from the work of Dr. Dacker Keltner, that touch is so important, especially in
Yes.
childhood, but at any age.
Right. Right.
That when we don't get nurturing touch, when
Right.
we don't get that warmth, that it hurts people. There are a
Absolutely.
lot of singles out there, or even somebody like me, I'm away from family. We are 4 people in 4 different countries right now.
Right.
So what message do you have for people who are
Yeah.
feeling touch deprived right now? Is there anything they
Well,
can
yes,
do?
you can take your hands and you can gently touch yourself, stroke yourself. You can wrap your arms around like this
Mhm.
and stroke your arms like that. And you can stroke yourself all over. And it's amazing. Can you feel it? Like just doing a little bit of touching, you can feel there's a tingling, right?
Yes.
There's a
Yes.
tingling that happens. And that's a way that you can nurture yourself. And put your hands on your heart and breathe into it.
Mm.
You know, like just be present.
Mm.
And that's a way we can physically nurture ourselves. We don't have to wait for somebody else. And I want to say the other thing is often if you're stroking and being stroked by someone else, sometimes you feel turned on. And what I say about that is, hooray, your body works. It's great. You feel turned on. You don't have to do anything with it. That's the thing, that's the retraining, because people feel like, oh, if I'm turned on, now I have to do something about that, right? No, you don't have to do anything but enjoy the feeling, right? And so that's, if I could give you that little piece of wisdom, young men, I would gladly do that, to give you that piece of wisdom, you know? And yeah, so I wish you all well. Maybe I'll see you again, and really take care. It's lovely to have met you.
Thank you so much.
And since
Thank
you like
you,
to spread
Shankar.
love,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
Muchas gracias, amigo.
Yeah.
Amiga.
Yeah.
Gracias.
Buenas noches.
Silvada.
Thank you.
Saludos,
Okay.
amor desde México.